is a light rising, not with thunder or applause, not with banners or armies, but with humility, sincerity, and the whisper of truth. Islam is rising in the West. It does not come to conquer land. It comes to conquer hearts, not with weapons, but with words, not with force, but with faith. In a world where noise dominates, where distractions multiply, and where truth is buried under opinion, Islam spreads quietly, like the first rays of dawn. People across Western lands are beginning to see something they weren't told. They're beginning to ask questions no one thought they would. And the answers, they're not coming from talk shows or textbooks. They're coming from the Quran. They're coming from prayer mats in prison cells. They're coming from Muslim neighbors who show compassion, decency, and strength. This light shines in places you'd never expect. A young student in France reading the Quran in secret, a former gang member in Chicago learning to make wudu, a single mother in the UK fasting for the first time in Ramadan. Not because someone forced her, but because her heart said, this is truth. You see, when the world promises freedom through indulgence, Islam promises freedom through discipline. When modernity says, you are the center, Islam says, God is the center, and through Him, you will find yourself. That message is quiet. It doesn't scream for attention, but like gravity, it pulls the sincere in, and through Him, you will find yourself. That message is quiet. It doesn't scream for attention, but like gravity, it pulls the sincere in. And now the mosques in London are full. The youth in Canada are asking what it means to be a believer. The call to prayer echoes not only in Istanbul, but in Manhattan. And every time someone says, La ilaha illallah, a new flame is lit. But why now? Why is the West listening? Because they've tasted what the world has to offer. Fame, pleasure, wealth. And yet the soul is starving. The heart is restless. And in that emptiness, the light of Islam is offering peace, not temporary peace, but the deep soul-level peace that only submission to the Creator can bring. This isn't just about religion, it's about awakening. A generation that thought it had no roots is finding its soul in the sands of Medina. A people who felt lost in luxury are finding purpose in prostration. Let them mock. Let them misunderstand. The light doesn't ask for approval. It just shines. And to you listening now, maybe you are one of those souls. Maybe something inside you is stirring. Maybe this light is already knocking on your heart. Don't ignore it. Don't silence it. Follow it. Because truth doesn't always come with a bang. Sometimes it comes as a whisper in the night, as a verse that moves your chest, as a tear that falls without explanation. And when you follow that light, when you step into the peace Islam offers, you're not just changing your life, you're joining a movement, a silent revolution of hearts turning back to God. The West may not see it yet, but soon they will. Because light, true light, cannot be hidden. Truth is a force unlike any other. It doesn't need to shout to be heard, nor does it require armies to defend it. Truth, in its purest form, carries an innate light, a clarity that pierces through confusion, a warmth that draws the sense ear, and a power that stands even when everything else falls. When we observe the growing curiosity and quiet spread of Islam across the West, we are witnessing the natural pull of truth in action. It is not a phenomenon built on noise, marketing campaigns, or political influence. Instead, it is rooted in something much deeper, the hunger of the human soul for meaning and the irresistible gravity of divine truth. All throughout history, whenever people were lost in materialism, overwhelmed by worldly distraction, or drowning in ideological chaos, the truth always found its way back into the center of the human heart. Like a compass returning to its true north, the sincere seeker always gravitates toward clarity. And the teachings of Islam, its monotheism, its discipline, its harmony between the spiritual and the rational offer that clarity. In the West today, people are beginning to ask questions that go beyond the surface. They are looking beyond material success and digital connection. They are searching for something timeless, something pure, something that answers not just the mind's curiosities, but the soul's deepest longing. In that search, many are discovering Islam, not as a foreign system or a rigid ideology, but as a mirror reflecting the truth they always sense deep within themselves. What makes this journey so powerful is that it is not forced. Islam does not demand loyalty through pressure. The Quran itself says there is no compulsion in religion. The truth has been made clear from error. This principle is lived out across the Western world today. Islam is not spreading through coercion, it's spreading through quiet revelation. It is happening in conversations between classmates, in moments of reflection, after reading a translation of the Quran, in the quiet tears shed by someone listening to a recitation they didn't understand yet felt deeply moved by. This is how truth works. It bypasses the noise and speaks directly to the heart. For many in the West, Islam was once presented only in terms of conflict, extremism, or cultural otherness. But now the narrative is shifting, not because of politics, but because people are meeting Muslims in real life, at work, in school, on social media, and discovering something profoundly different. They're seeing how Islam inspires kindness, strength, humility, and discipline. They're realizing that behind the veil of stereotypes lies a spiritual tradition that has transformed lives for over 400 years and is still transforming lives today. And what's especially unique is that this awakening is taking place in places that were once considered spiritually numb, places where churches are emptying, where secularism has dominated public discourse, and where faith was dismissed as an outdated relic. In those same places, young men and women are choosing to pray 5 times a day. They're fasting in Ramadan while their peers party. They're reading the Quran when others scroll through endless distractions. And they're doing it not because someone told them to, but because something within them has been illuminated. That's the power of truth. It doesn't need to sell itself. It doesn't need to bend to trends. Truth stands firm, and those who are tired of falsehood eventually find their way to it. The West is full of people who have tried everything. They've tasted fame, wealth, indulgence, and freedom in its most exaggerated forms. Yet the emptiness remains. The heart knows it was made for more. And Islam, in its essence, says, you were not created in vain. You were created by the most merciful for a purpose greater than this world. That message is not loud, but it is clear. And once someone truly hears it, it's hard to turn back. When people witness Muslims prostrating, they see not just a ritual, but a symbol of surrender, of placing the ego on the ground and elevating the soul toward God. When they hear the Quran, even without understanding the Arabic, many feel a strange pull. Scientists have studied its rhythm. Artists have admired its symmetry. But beyond all intellectual appreciation, it speaks directly to something deeper. That is the silent power of divine truth. And as more people in the West open their hearts, they realize that Islam isn't a stranger. It is in many ways a return to values they respect: honesty, family, accountability, justice, and compassion. A return to the belief that life has structure, that morality isn't relative, and that there is a creator who knows us better than we know ourselves. These ideas resonate because they are not foreign to the soul. They are familiar. They feel like home. This is why we say truth has its own light. You can cover it with media misrepresentation. You can bury it under layers of false narratives, but you cannot extinguish it. Because when truth enters the heart, no power on earth can remove it. That's what we're seeing in the West today. Not a cultural movement, not a political wave, but a spiritual reawakening powered by the silent, undeniable light of truth. And this light, once kindled, becomes contagious. The new Muslim teaches another. The child raised in a Muslim home brings faith to a friend. The person inspired by a video goes on to read a book. one by one, heart by heart, the light spreads. No slogans, no campaigns, just the natural attraction of the human soul to what is real. So let the truth shine. Let it speak. Let it move in silence and in strength. For in a world full of noise, truth remains the one voice that never fades. And Islam, this ancient, beautiful, uncompromising call to the one God, is that truth, lighting up the West, one soul at a time. Throughout history, the most profound transformations never began with chaos or spectacle. They often started in silence, in obscurity, in places the world overlooked. Real revival, the kind that changes societies, values, and destinies, often starts not in palaces or parliaments, but in hearts, in homes, and in humble places where truth is received without noise. Today, Islam's growth in the West is a perfect example of this pattern. It is not a media revolution. It's not carried by celebrities or governments. It is quiet. It is personal. It is spiritual. And yet, it is becoming powerful enough to reshape entire communities. What we are witnessing in the West is not the imposition of a religion, but the awakening of the soul. One person at a time is discovering Islam, not because they were convinced by an argument, but because they were moved by sincerity. A young man battling addiction finds clarity in the simplicity of prayer. A woman tired of society's expectations finds dignity in the modesty and structure of Islam. A seeker raised in a secular household stumbles upon the Quran and feels as if it was speaking directly to their pain, their questions, and their purpose. These moments don't come with fanfare. There are no headlines, but they matter more than any political shift, because when hearts turn, entire cultures eventually follow. There is a deep beauty in the way Islam spreads, through intention, not interruption. It is passed quietly, from a friend who invites you to join a fast during Ramadan, from a coworker who steps away for prayer and returns with calm, from a stranger's story online who left behind emptiness and found God in the stillness of sujud. This is not how the world expects a movement to spread, but this is how God works, in subtlety, in sincerity, and in perfect timing. The West has long been seen as a land of secularism, liberalism, and unending distractions. But beneath the surface, there is a growing discomfort. Many are questioning the very foundations of modern living. What is freedom if it leads to loneliness? What is success if it comes without inner peace? What is progress if it disconnects us from our Creator? These questions are rising. And with them, people are turning toward faith, toward structure, and toward a way of life that offers clarity in the chaos. Islam, with its divine consistency, is offering that refuge. One of the most powerful proofs that this revival is real lies in where it's happening. In places society has forgotten or written off. In prisons, where inmates often raised without guidance are finding Islam and transforming their entire lives. In inner cities, where the youth are rejecting nihilism and choosing the discipline of Islam. In universities, where students disillusioned with postmodernism are turning to revelation for answers. In homes, where parents who never knew faith are raising children who memorize the Quran. These are the silent centers of revival. No headlines cover them, but they are where the future is being built. And revival is not just about numbers. It's about depth. Islam is not merely gaining converts, it's producing conviction. The new Muslims emerging from the West are often people who had everything the world could offer: freedom, money, education, but still felt empty. They didn't come to Islam for comfort. They came for truth. And once they tasted it, they committed themselves in ways that sometimes even lifelong Muslims find inspiring. They study. They pray, they serve, they carry the message forward with a fire that no one can extinguish. The silence of this movement is what makes it unstoppable because no one can control it. It doesn't rely on institutions or influence. It flows from heart to heart. It moves through quiet conversations, moments of introspection, acts of kindness, and the profound peace found in submission to God. It is the kind of revival that no political narrative can suppress because it is not based on politics. It is based on fitra, the natural disposition of the human soul to seek its creator. And when that fitra is awakened, nothing can stand in its way. This revival also reminds us of the early days of Islam. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, began alone, in silence, in a cave. The early Muslims in Mecca were few and persecuted, but their hearts were filled with conviction. They weren't trying to change the world, they were just trying to obey God, and yet through that silent obedience, they changed the course of human history. In the same way, Muslims in the West today are quietly planting the seeds of a future many can't yet see, a future where faith, family, discipline, and divine purpose return to the center of life. And perhaps this is why revival often begins in silence, because silence allows sincerity to take root. Without the noise of public approval or social validation, belief is tested and purified. The person who chooses Islam today in the West is often doing so at a cost. They may lose friends. They may face ridicule. They may walk away from old lifestyles, but they gain something the world can't give, a relationship with the one who created them. And that relationship becomes the light that guides them and the spark that ignites others. So as we observe Islam's quiet rise in the West, let us not underestimate it. Let us not look for signs in political debates or media coverage. The real signs are in the souls that are waking up, the homes that are being restructured around faith, and the communities that are slowly finding their way back to God. This is not a movement of man, it is a mercy from God. And though it may be silent now, it will not remain so forever. Because once the hearts are ready, revival becomes visible. The light that was once hidden begins to shine openly. And the world sees what it had long forgotten, that the truth, even when ignored, never disappears. It waits, it watches, and then it returns quietly but completely. And when it does, no force on earth can stop it. One of the most striking realities about the spread of Islam in the West is that it is not just a shift in belief, but a transformation of identity. It is not just about someone saying a few words of testimony. It is about the reformation of thought, the rebuilding of life's priorities, and the recentering of the self around the divine. For many in the West, coming to Islam is not an addition to their lives. It's a complete reorientation. What makes this journey so powerful is not just that people are entering Islam, but that they are doing so after having already lived lives that the world often defines as complete. They had careers, freedom, education, even luxury, and yet something was missing. That something is not trivial. It is the central anchor of the human soul, the connection to the Creator. And once that connection is rediscovered, it becomes impossible to ignore. Many in the West are experiencing this exact awakening. Islam for them is not just a religion from another part of the world. It becomes the answer to questions they have carried for years. Questions about purpose, about suffering, about morality, about what it means to live a good and meaningful life. In a society where truth is often treated as relative, Islam provides moral clarity. In a world obsessed with self-expression, Islam offers humility. In a culture that promotes indulgence, Islam teaches restraint. These contrasts are not burdens. They are the very reasons many are drawn to the faith. Because the soul, deep down, knows that boundaries protect freedom, that truth brings peace, and that discipline leads to fulfillment. The most fascinating part of this transformation is how internal it is. For many reverts and returning Muslims in the West, the journey begins in solitude. Perhaps it's a book they read by chance or a verse they hear while scrolling through their phone. Perhaps it's a conversation that lingers long after it's ended, or a tragedy that forces them to reflect on life in a way they never have before. In those moments, something begins to stir. And even though the world around them may still be loud, their inner world begins to quiet. The noise fades and the light starts to shine. Slowly, step by step, they begin to seek answers, not for others, but for themselves. In Islam, they find not just knowledge, but alignment. The teachings of Islam do not contradict their rational minds, nor do they suppress their natural emotions. Instead, Islam speaks to the heart in a language that feels both familiar and majestic. It doesn't demand blind faith. It invites contemplation. It doesn't encourage passivity. It calls for action, for character, for reform. And so the person who once lived without direction begins to walk with purpose. Prayer becomes a daily meeting with the one who created them. Fasting becomes a spiritual discipline that strengthens the will. Charity becomes not just a good deed, but an act of obedience to a greater system of justice. What's remarkable is how this change impacts every area of life. Relationships begin to heal or take new shape. Time is spent more mindfully. The person once enslaved to desires begins to taste true freedom. The freedom that comes from self-mastery, from knowing that your value comes from God and not society. This freedom isn't loud, but it is powerful. It builds quiet confidence. It creates peace where there was once anxiety. It replaces confusion with conviction. All of this is part of the silent revolution unfolding across the Western world. Islam is not coming as a wave of political force or cultural dominance. It is entering hearts. And when hearts change, everything changes. Families are rebuilt. Generations are impacted. Legacies are rewritten. A young woman in Germany who wears hijab despite social pressure is not just making a personal choice. She is sending a message to the world that faith is stronger than fear. A teenager in America who wakes for Fajr while others sleep is building a life of discipline that the world cannot shake. A father in Canada who teaches his children to love the Quran is planting seeds that will outlive him. These moments are quiet, but they are the future. This is how true revolutions begin, not with mass movements, but with individuals who change at the root. And once that change takes hold, it is incredibly resilient because it is not based on trends, popularity, or peer pressure. It is based on truth. And truth once known cannot be unknown. When someone truly sees the beauty of Tawheed, the oneness of God, when they taste the calm of sujood, when they experience the unity of the ummah, no worldly ideology can compete. This is not emotionalism. It is spiritual clarity. It is also deeply personal. Every person who comes to Islam in the West has their own story. Some came through study, others through suffering. Some were raised Muslim but returned after years of distance. Others came from completely different faiths or no faith at all. But in every story, the same thread appears. Something awakened. A silent light entered their life. And from that moment on, they were never the same. This is the miracle of guidance. It cannot be forced. It cannot be fabricated. It comes from the one who guides whom he wills. But when it comes, it changes everything. And that is what is happening now across the West. Slowly, silently, steadily, a light is spreading, not through conquest, but through connection, not through pressure, but through personal transformation. This light is Islam, and it is illuminating lives, one heart at a time. So let us not be fooled by the silence. Just because the world isn't talking about it doesn't mean it's not happening. Real change doesn't always make headlines, but it makes history. And the silent spread of Islam in the West is not just a movement. It is a sign that the soul, no matter where it lives or how long it has been lost, will always recognize the light when it sees it. And when it does, no force on earth can turn